My name is Kate Girard. I'm the Director of Medical and Scientific Affairs at ViaCord. I've been in the cord blood industry for coming up on 20 years now. And my role with ViaCord is after the units are stored and banked, when we use those units, whether they're going out for clinical use or research and development, like all of the collaborations that we do to support the use of the products that are banked with us. Cord blood banking is the process of collecting and storing the blood that's left over in the umbilical cord after the baby is born. So after the baby is born and the umbilical cord is cut, so now the baby is with mom or, being tended to by the medical staff, there's residual blood left over, and that blood has valuable cells in it. And so cord blood banking is the process of collecting that, which is a very simple procedure. And then it gets sent to a facility where it can be processed and stored and kept safe in a bank. The amount of blood that is collected is highly variable. My background before working in cord blood banking is in obstetrics and labor and delivery. And I can tell you that some umbilical cords are tiny and very short and very skinny, and some of them are huge and very long. And so there's no way to know how much you're going to get until you know how big the container is, right? How big is the umbilical cord? Sometimes we see very little collections, sometimes we see very big collections. We just ask that the collector does the best job possible with whatever they're presented. There's different methods or different formats for banking. There's public cord blood banking, and then there's family or private cord blood banking. Public cord blood banking is when a family decides to donate their cord blood after delivery, and it can be given to a public facility that can evaluate it and decide whether it can become their registry. It can be searchable. So if it's donated, the family no longer has any rights to it. It becomes part of a registry so that other people can search it if they need it. Family cord blood banking or private cord blood banking is when a family decides that they would like to make the investment to have that cord blood banked, for their family. So the process is very similar, but then the only people who have access to that would be that family for the use within that family. The cord blood banking industry was really born after the first cord blood transplant. I think the more common terminology people might be familiar with is a bone marrow transplant. So bone marrow transplants have been going on for decades and decades and decades. And researchers and scientists realize that there are stem cells within umbilical cord blood that are the same. They're hematopoietic or blood-forming stem cells, the same type of stem cells you find in bone marrow. So in 1988 was the first sibling cord blood transplant, and real live proof that this child was transplanted using his sister's cord blood, and that it engrafted and that it worked. And, that's kind of what spawned the entire industry, right? Is that there was proof and clinical validation that the cells from cord blood actually had clinical value. And for the indications where a bone marrow transplant is a potential therapeutic, it's just not bone marrow transplant anymore. It's called stem cell transplant because the cells couldn't come from bone marrow or from cord blood. And having access to them could be valuable for that family. Whether you deliver by cesarean or vaginal delivery, the collection process is the same. The amount of time you have to do the collection is really more Mother Nature's decision. Once the cord is cut and clamped, then a certain amount of time, blood clots. What it does. It doesn't take, too long, but you clean the cord and basically just drain out that leftover blood and then, do that in the course of everything else. It's not something that you need to go back and do later. It kind of fits in the flow of the delivery to do it at that time. The umbilical cord blood is processed and then it is frozen. It's a very fancy and very technically sound method of freezing it, a method that's been validated over many, many years. And it's an exact science on how to ensure that you've frozen the cells, that they will be viable and they will be good on the other end. And that's really the most important part. So people often ask, how long can you store it for? There's no expiration date, because the truth is, if you freeze them correctly, time stops for those cells. The cells don't know if it's been 1 minute or 100 years, because time has stopped for them. The challenge or the way that cells get damaged is if you don't freeze them correctly or if you don't thaw them correctly. That's what's going to damage the cells. It's not the amount of time that they're sitting in the freezer, because as long as that freezer is adequately, backed up and tracked and maintained and everything like that, like I said, the cells, the time has stopped for them. So there's been great research done looking at that. There were publications that came out looking at cord blood cells after being frozen for 5, 10, 15. I think there was one that was 26 and a half years, all by the same researcher that had the foresight to take a cord blood and bank it in little aliquots. And then after 5 years, took one out and looked at it. 10 years, took one out and looked at it and showed that there was no change in the viability of the cells. They actually took them and grafted them into a mouse model to show that they actually functioned correctly. So there's really good proof that time is not the thing that matters. It's the expertise of freezing and the expertise in thawing before use.